Husband's mistress came to the wife's place of work to show her big belly. The wife smiled and... Sunitha was as hard-working as an experienced businesswoman could be. She permanently established herself because she wanted everyone to take her seriously. The way she walked oozed confidence, and she would always be bold with her peers with an air of self-assurance. And today was no different. She sat in her office, taking a sip of her black coffee while she went over the sales report for the week. When she noticed a few errors in the report, she opened her email account to let her assistant know so she could fix them. Unfortunately, Sunitha's laptop was signed into her husband's email account, and this is when she noticed a random email from someone named Sophia among the slew of credit card payments and bank notification emails. But what she saw was more than disheartening. The lady wrote to him through email to express her appreciation for the flowers he had sent upon hearing the news of their pregnancy and to talk about their upcoming holiday plans. The lady sending the email probably didn't realize that Sunitha also had access to his email account, but what she had seen was enough to send her into a frenzy. Denial and horror were her first responses, and Sunitha attempted to reason with herself that she must be wrong, that this was somehow a misunderstanding. Then it hit her. Her husband had been infertile ever since they got married. Thinking that this was just a con artist, she emailed back pretending to be her husband. She told her to come to an address which also happened to be her workplace, and she did this as a joke but also out of curiosity to see if this so-called scammer would actually show up. But to her surprise, this lady actually did show up outside the office nearly an hour later asking for Sunitha's husband. She barged into the room and told Sunitha that she knew everything about her husband and how he had fallen out of love with Sunitha. She also told Sunitha that she was now pregnant with their baby, something Sunitha could never give to her husband. But despite all this, Sunitha just smiled and asked the woman to calm down, since she knew her husband was infertile. Well, Sophia didn't calm down, and security had to be called to escort her off the premises. She went home conflicted and wanted to talk to her husband about all of this mess. She never doubted his loyalty, so she didn't actually suspect him of anything. But she wanted to know how this woman figured out how to blackmail her husband. But when she went home, her husband was already waiting for her in the living room. He asked her to sit down, and when she did, he told her everything about his affair with this other woman and how he had gotten her pregnant. Well, this was the last straw for Sunitha. She immediately broke down in tears and asked her husband to pack his stuff and leave the house. She locked herself in her room and cried her heart out, but it seemed to all make sense now, how little her husband participated in daily household activities, and when she was in the thick of things with their 2 young children and just trying to get by on so little sleep, and she figured it was because he was focused on his profession. The suddenness of his treachery was like a kick to the gut for Sunitha, and her heart was broken, and she couldn't process all of this so suddenly. Her husband tried knocking on the door, but Sunitha wasn't having it. She didn't open the door, and she called her closest friend, her brother Ruth, and told him everything about the entire thing, from start to finish. Ruth was of course worried about his sister, so he drove to her place and stayed with her all night to help her cope with the situation after her husband left with all of his possessions. Sunitha could do nothing but cry, but Ruth convinced her to go on some sort of vacation. And Sunitha thought that this might be very well her only way of escaping the pain her husband left her with. So the next day, Sunitha, with her teary eyes, went to the HR department to take her annual leave and decided to go to Spain. And after a bit of pre-planning and packing, Sunitha booked her ticket to Spain and left. This vacation proved to be much more fruitful to Sunitha than she may have initially thought. While she was roaming around the busy streets of Madrid, while admiring the plaza, She went into some sort of trance and lost track of where she was going. And she ended up walking right in the middle of the road, and a biker was coming at high speed from the other direction. Panicked, the people yelled at Sunitha to look out for the bike. But when she did, the bike braked as hard as possible, coming to a stop right as it touched her floral dress. And Sunitha apologized, but the guy was great and laughed it off. He was mesmerized by the beautiful woman and offered to take her to a coffee shop downtown that was in another one of Madrid's sightseeing locations. Sunitha agreed and asked the man's name, who replied with Brock. The two had coffee and talked for a bit to get to know more about each other. And since Sunitha was still very emotionally vulnerable, she ended up telling Brock everything. But to her surprise, Brock related to it and offered her the emotional support she needed. They both frequently met during the week, and he took her on bike rides throughout the city and even the outskirts. She loved seeing how enthusiastic he was about his hobby and how his face lit up every time he mentioned his bike. Other than that, Sunitha thought he was very emotionally intelligent and never thought she'd meet someone who could understand her on a level this deep. She thought this was precisely what was missing from her old life, and that this missing piece of her life might be right here in Spain. On the day she was supposed to leave, she ended up confessing her love for Brock, and Brock told her he felt the same way, and she had the gut feeling that this guy was just the one for her. The two decided to extend her vacation while they figured things out, but Sunitha finally decided that she wanted to live with Brock in his home country, Spain. And during this time, Sunitha's now ex-husband realized that the baby wasn't his, and that his girlfriend had also been sleeping around with other people. He realized now how much of a terrible mistake he had made and immediately wanted to make amends. He wrote Sunitha an email saying, "I hope you're doing well, Sunitha. My marriage with you ended because of an affair I had with a coworker, absolutely the worst decision I ever made. The fact that her husband is unaware of the affair makes me feel like I'm on the receiving end of a bad deal. A piece of me thinks he ought to be aware of this, and we should both bear the weight of our actions, which we understood to be wrong. And that's how I feel. But I'm trying to take the high road for the time being and just worry about myself and my motivations. Of course, she may have also had a problem with her conscience and may be involved in another affair at this point, but what sort of life would that be if not a bankrupt one? I'm really sorry for everything I did. If there's something I can do to get back together, please let me know." Sunitha had heard enough of her ex-husband's lies and didn't have a shred of faith left in her, so she blocked him on all platforms and chose to focus on herself. Luckily, her company had an office in Spain, so she just transferred to the branch closest to her. And even though her family was skeptical of Brock, there was nothing they could have done to prevent her from leaving for the life she wanted. And Sunitha moved on from her former spouse after a few months and claimed she was better for having experienced his treachery. Sometimes the worst things in life are the best teachers. Sunitha said she no longer has any animosity against her former spouse and wishes him for a long and prosperous life. He deserves to find love when he's ready, and she hopes he does. She believes that the only thing that will ever be the same is change, for better or worse. And if you can learn to accept that, you can handle anything that comes your way. Breaking up isn't the end of the world, even if it hurts. Whenever things become challenging, Sunitha tries to remind herself that she is more than just her marriage, her spouse, or her family. And all that matters to Sunitha is that she can still love, and that she has found out that despite everything, she is still lovable.